Hatha Yoga Unveiled, or Demystifying Hatha Yoga. It may not be what you think, trying to come up with a name for this video. Hatha, it's actually pronounced Hatha. So first we're going to talk about what it's not, many people perceive it to be, and also what it is. So we're going to go back in time and practice Jnana Yoga, the yogic path of wisdom. If you were to go to a yoga studio outside of India, in the West, so United States, Europe, Australia, Scandinavia, forgive me if I didn't mention your continent. So if you go to a yoga studio and on the schedule they have a class called Hatha Yoga, and they distinguish the difference between Hatha Yoga and, let's say, Ashtanga Yoga or a Vinyasa flow. And that's where the mistake is being made. Let's talk about the definition first. A lot of people perceive Hatha Yoga to be the sun and the moon and the union between the two, the Ha representing the sun or the right side of the body, the Pingala. The Pingala Nadi. The Ta, the left side of the body, the feminine side, so masculine right side, feminine left side, or the Ida Nadi. These are the two side channels and the combination or the union of the two. And that's what Hatha Yoga is symbolized to mean, but it's not the exact translation. The reason why Goraksha, who we're going to talk about a little bit later on, the reason why he chose the word Hatha, because Hatha actually means, it's actually pronounced Hatha, not Hatha, it actually means forceful. So we're going to talk about why he chose the word forceful and why it contrasts what a lot of people perceive it to be. But before we go back in time, I want you to smash the like button if you're enjoying this video and consider subscribing if you want to learn all about yoga, hot yoga, yogic flows, tutorials, and factoids like this particular video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends. So if you go into these yoga studios and you take a Hatha Yoga class, many times it's a relaxed, sort of gentle flow. And in essence, it's exactly the opposite of what it means. Because the word Hatha, the reason why Goraksha chose the word Hatha, is to forcefully awaken an energy inside the body. So if you're now practicing asana in a gentle form, nothing wrong with it, I'm not making a judgment about it, it's still not to be labeled Hatha Yoga. And let me explain why. We get to go back in time in history. So now we're going to go back in time with some history. Now, the traditionalists, in the beginning of Hatha Yoga, we call the pre-classical time period, yogis were meant to renounce the world, that the physical body, and this is such an important point because it really talks about how Hatha Yoga came to be. Much later on, by the way, the traditionalists looked at the body as a hindrance. They look at desire as a distraction to our main quest, which is the concept of yoga, which is the connection with the universe, or concept to God. What's going to keep us separate from God is our desire. So we want to renounce our desire. The ancient yogis say we want to not be distracted by our desire, not be distracted by the outside world, and to go within. Now Patanjali comes along thousands of years later with a different concept. He says, well, we got to quiet the mind first. So Patanjali Yoga, or what's known as classical yoga, his concept was to quiet the mind. So this is important because this is now setting up where Hatha Yoga comes in. The traditionalists looked at the body as a distraction. Patanjali wasn't necessarily thinking the body was a distraction. He wanted to get it under control. He actually was a proponent of keeping the body healthy so that you could sit longer in meditation. Therefore, you wouldn't be distracted, so you'll be able to quiet your mind. But Patanjali was also about the yoga being a renunciant, renouncing the world. So taking you to the history of yoga very quickly, the traditionalists said, okay, we want to renounce the body, we want to renounce the world and become a renunciant. And we want to go up into the caves of the Himalayas and meditate to realize our true identity, our true self, self-realization, therefore finding God realization, because yoga is all about connection with God, connection with the universe. Patanjali comes along thousands of years later and has a different approach. He said we now need to quiet the mind. But now Hatha Yoga has a different approach, which comes 1,000 years after Patanjali. So the concept of Hatha Yoga, which we're going to talk about the definition of it in a second, that came 1,000 years after Patanjali. But now comes a different approach. The post-classical time period of yoga, which starts 500 AD. In yoga terms, they categorize it as CE, or the Common Era. So 500 CE is really when post-classical starts. And now Tantra Yoga comes into play, which is a whole different approach on finding the connection with the universe, finding the connection with God. And so now we move into the post-classical time, and right around 1000 CE or 1000 AD comes a very powerful yogi named Matsyendra. So here's the story of Matsyendra. He was a fisherman. He's fishing in his boat, and he catches this very large fish. This fish is so big that he pulls the fishing rod and Matsyendra into the water and swallows him. This is obviously a folklore story. So the fish then proceeds to swim at the bottom of the ocean. At the bottom of the ocean is Shiva, holding his big trident. Does it sound familiar? Neptune and Poseidon also had tridents, and they're also at the bottom of the ocean. Who came first? Probably Shiva. So he's at the bottom of the ocean with his trident, which represents the Trimurti, by the way, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So he's at the bottom of the ocean, and he's lecturing his wife, Parvati, on the subject and the science of Tantric Yoga, which means to weave, to include, to loom. Tantric Yoga, which is, we're going to talk about what he means in a second. So after this long dissertation, he looks down and he sees that his wife has fallen asleep. And he says, has nobody heard my words of wisdom? Matsyendra was in that big fish at the bottom of the ocean, and he had heard every word. And he yells out, I heard you, master. So now he realizes who his true disciple is. Instead of initiating Parvati on the science of Tantra Yoga, he initiates his number one disciple, Matsyendra. 12 years later, the fish was caught. And they open up his belly, and out comes Matsyendra. He takes such a twist and turn in his life that they named the spine twist after him. So Ardha Matsyendrasana, sound familiar, which is half Lord of the Fishes, named after Matsyendra. This was a different concept, a concept that the country of India did not really embrace favorably because it's a very conservative country. You won't even see people kissing on television in India. The Kama Sutra is an underground kind of thing. Tantric sexuality is an underground thing in India. So the rituals of Tantrism was more underground in India. So this is a little different concept. Instead of going up into the caves of the Himalayas and renouncing the world, the yogis labeled the householder. Yogananda's guru's guru, the Hari Mahashaya, was an accountant on a railroad. He had a wife and two daughters. Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's guru, also had a wife and daughter. So you don't have to be celibate. You don't have to be a renunciant to find God realization. It was a whole different concept. Tantrism, which now parallels a different path of what many people believe our yoga comes from. Let's talk about that for a second. Most people look at the 8-limb path of Patanjali as the foundation of where yoga comes from in modern day times. And the Tantric yogis were very undogmatic. They embraced Patanjali's 8-limb path. Obviously, they disagreed with his dualistic approach of philosophy because they embraced the physical and the spiritual as one, which was a different philosophy. But the Ashtanga path, the 8-limb path of Patanjali, was a prescription for the yogi that's sitting up in the caves of the Himalayas. The Tantric path, which parallels the 8-limb path, was different. That was more for the householder, the one that lives within the world. But the Tantric path parallels the Ashtanga or the 8-limb path, a little different than a lot of people perceive. So now let's go back to Matsyendra. Now what Matsyendra does, based on the teachings of Shiva, his guru, he creates his own path of Tantra Yoga based on Shiva's teachings called the Kaula path, coming from the root word Kula, which means family or flock. So he creates the Kaula path of Tantra Yoga, which combines the left and the right path of Tantra. The right path were very conservative, the left path were extremists. They were sort of in the middle. They were not rejected by society. They were very ritualistic. So out of the Kaula path comes his elite, what they call the Yoga Adepts. The Yoga realized masters, or what they call the Jivamuktis, which the traditionalists believed and Patanjali believed was impossible, that you could find self-realization while you were in the body. But they were embracing the body, using the body as their vehicle to find the connection with the universe. So they became Jivamuktis. And his number one disciple was a guy named Goraksha. So let me tell you the story of Goraksha. Before Goraksha was born, Matsyendra goes to his guru Shiva and he says, will you find me a disciple greater than myself? Very humble request. And Shiva said, well, how can I do that? You're a Jivamukti, you're a realized master. You're at the highest level you can be. Can you do it anyway? Again, even more humble. So Shiva says, okay, here's what I'll do. I will reincarnate as your disciple, and I'm Shiva, so you can't be greater than I am. So obviously you'll get your wish. Side note, Bikram asked the same thing to his guru, Vishnu Ghosh, and I was reincarnated. Just kidding. Why am I kidding? Because that'll be the last thing Bikram would ask Vishnu Ghosh. Anyways, back to Matsyendra. So a woman is praying for a child. And Matsyendra goes to the woman. He says, Shiva has granted you your wish, so I want you to either swallow these, some say they're seeds, some say they were the ash, the booty, which is a very sacred ash in India. Let's say they're seeds. He says, swallow the seeds, you will become pregnant, you will have your child, I'll have my disciple, and we'll both be happy. And he leaves. So she thinks he's nuts because she wanted a child, not a plant. So she takes the seeds and throws them into the cow dung, and there they lied for 12 years. So Matsyendra comes back 12 years later and says, where's my disciple? So she goes into the cow dung and she sifts through the big pile pile of cow shit at like Laura Dern in Jurassic Park. And out of the cow dung comes his 12-year-old disciple, which, by the way, was Vishnu Ghos's favorite story. He would say, never take the disciple out of the shit or you will spoil him forever. So now Goraksha grows up to be even more of a charismatic leader than Matsyendra, and he creates his own sect of yoga called the Kumpata sect, which we're not going to talk about, but out of the Kumpata sect comes Hatha yoga. So as Hatha yogis, it's important to understand the history. So here comes Hatha yoga now, based on Goraksha's teachings, also Matsyendra. Matsyendra is also given co-authorship to Hatha yoga, but it was mostly Goraksha. Go is cow, Raksha's eye or protector. So cow eye or cow protector. So he now creates this new form of yoga, also based on Tantrism, also based on finding immortality. So now based on the teachings of Shiva. So let's look at this chart that I created. Shiva teaches Matsyendra at the bottom of the ocean. Matsyendra then creates the Kaula path of Tantra Yoga. Out of that comes the Nata sect, the Yoga Adepts. Out of that comes Goraksha, Kumpata, Hatha. There is the path. I don't see Patanjali's name in there because Patanjali was not part of this particular path or this prescription or this roadmap. Patanjali's roadmap was paralleled. Like I say, they embraced Patanjali, but they had a different concept, a different understanding. This is now for the yogi who is a householder, a yogi who lives within the world, not a renunciant that's up in the mountains of the Himalayas meditating. So now here's why he chose the word Hatha, because he found this new energy. This is now only about 1,000 years old. Yoga being 6,000 years old. Hatha yoga is only 1,000 years old. Techniques to awaken this new energy, they called the Kundalini Shakti, the feminine energy. Kundalini means she that coils, energy that lays latent in most people at the very base of the spine, with the Shakti energy. And what happens is, in Hatha yoga, the reason why I chose the word Hatha was to forcefully awaken that energy up the spine. So here's the metaphor that George Feurenstein, who's the author of all the books that we use in the Barkan Method teacher training programs. If, by the way, you're interested in becoming a Barkan Method hot yoga teacher, there are links in the description below. I'd love to have you join the Barkan Method family. The reason why he chose the word forceful, and this is the metaphor that he used. It's like the hammer that hits the anvil. The blacksmith takes the hammer, hits the metal on the anvil, he heats it up, he hits the anvil to forcefully awaken this Kundalini Shakti that lays dormant in the average person, up the spine. So when I say that they're using the body to find God, more specifically the spine and the brain, Yogananda would say the spine and the brain are the altars to God. Through pranayama, through asana, through the mudras and the bandhas and the kriyas, we use these techniques to awaken this very powerful energy, and by awakening it up the spine, we free the soul that stays locked in the spine. We free the soul out of the body. Now back to planet Earth.
I was lost in a moment.
Because now we're talking about modern day times and what Hatha Yoga, Goraksha's intention was, a spiritual intention, to awaken that Kundalini Shakti up the center channel we call the Sushumna Nadi to find the universe, to find God. But so how has Hatha Yoga evolved to present day times? Hatha Yoga now has really taken on more of an asana approach. But back in Goraksha and Matsyendra's day, it was more about pranayama, awakening the energy through the breath, forceful breathing. That's why the Kundalini yogis, the Sikhs, their particular style of yoga is definitely a form of Hatha yoga if you're looking at it from the point of view of awakening the Kundalini Shakti energy. So what are the real styles of Hatha yoga? And this is really the basis of this whole video. The real styles of Hatha yoga are the ones that forcefully awaken this Kundalini Shakti energy up the spine. And in modern day times, we do it mostly through asana and pranayama. So what are the true styles of Hatha yoga? The styles of Hatha yoga in modern day times that are the forceful styles using mostly pranayama and asana to open up the body and awaken that energy. So it's a blanket. We got to look at Hatha yoga here in the top, and all the particular true styles of Hatha yoga come underneath that one umbrella. So there's Ashtanga and Iyengar and Vinyasa on this side of the coin. But under the same umbrella, but over here in a different path, is Bikram yoga and Barkan yoga and the hot yoga world. These are all true forms of Hatha yoga. So you could actually be doing a gentle style of yoga, a gentle style of asana in your studio, and they may call it Hatha yoga, but according to this particular definition, it's in complete contrast of the true definition of what Hatha yoga really means. So over time, in the modern day times, why did they then confused the word Hatha Yoga with the gentle approach to asana. I don't know. I think it just became a misinterpretation. Richard Hillman wrote a book in the 50s and he called his particular style of yoga Hatha Yoga. It was a very gentle approach. I think he misunderstood the word. Lilias Folan, dear friend of mine, also does a very gentle style of yoga. One of the pioneers in this country, she also labeled it Hatha Yoga, once again in contrast to the word. Possibly Richard Hillman and Lilias Folan planted the seed of how that word sort of evolved today as becoming what most people think is a gentle style. But in contrast to the real word, the real meaning of Hatha Yoga, it's a forceful style to awaken the Kundalini Shakti up the center channel, to find the universe and to find God. So I'm not saying go into the yoga studio that's advertising Hatha Yoga as a gentle style and say, hey, you know what, you're labeling it wrong, or that's not what it is. We don't want to make other people wrong. It's not what yoga is all about. It's just a misinterpreted word. So instead of saying I teach Vinyasa, I teach Ashtanga, I teach Iyengar, and I teach a little Hatha, it's like saying I do ballet, and I do modern dance, and I do tap dance, and I do a little dance. So I want you to think of Hatha Yoga as this big umbrella. You're a Hatha Yoga teacher, and under that umbrella is Ashtanga, and Iyengar, and Vinyasa, and Bikram, and Barkan. They all fall underneath the same umbrella, Hatha Yoga, or Hatha. So that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. You want to learn all about yoga, specifically hot yoga. Hit the like button, share it with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.